All right, welcome into the Orange Zone podcast, everyone. I'm Ashley Wenskoski here with Jon Meterparel, voice of the Boston College Eagles, Syracuse's opponent this week. The Orange finally back at home. We haven't seen them at home since September, and here we are, the calendar flipping to November. They'll be at home this Friday against Boston College. Jon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ashley. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you with us. So first off, I just want you to take me through the Eagles season so far. It's been a little bit of an up and down road, but how does this team compare to you in comparison to teams you've seen in years past?
Well, certainly has been a roller coaster at times. I know you guys are accustomed to that in Syracuse as well, but lately it's been really good. They've won four straight. They are clearly establishing themselves as one of the top rushing teams in the country. They're leading the ACC in rushing at 214 yards per game. So they've become dominant on the offensive line. And that's always been as Syracuse fans would know, a hallmark of Boston College teams. They clearly like to throw as well, but they have a dynamic sophomore quarterback, a transfer from Central Florida named Thomas Castellanos, who leads the nation in rushing for quarterbacks. So there's a lot of complexities now to their offense that Syracuse fans didn't see from BC last year, primarily because BC offensive line was wounded all year. And that was a huge part of why they went 3-9. So it's a much different team. They almost beat Florida State, lost 31-29, had that game for a while, played the Seminoles tougher than any team in the country. So that was clearly a sign that BC might be headed in the right direction. They've had their moments where they just haven't put together a 60-minute game. They're still, quite frankly, searching for that. They play maybe 53 minutes, and there's 7 minutes that aren't good. So, again, I know something that a lot of teams around the ACC are accustomed to, but it looks like, Ashley, that they're turning the corner.
If someone had told you that this team would be sitting at 5-3 going into this week, would you have believed them at the beginning of the season?
Most definitely. I think many people that cover this team and are close to this team knew that the schedule was kind, to say the least. BC doesn't play Clemson this year. BC doesn't play North Carolina. They don't play North Carolina State. They don't play Wake Forest. So a lot of the thunder, Duke, a lot of the thunder in the conference is not on the schedule. And we looked at it and said, oh boy, this looks like maybe an 8-win team. So it all sets up well. Who knows? You play the schedule game, it can be dicey. But coming into the year, based on what they had returning and based on the offensive line coming back intact, I thought that they would have a good year.
Would you say that the major difference for them has been that transfer at quarterback as well as the offensive line?
Yeah, no question. I think there's been continuity there. They felt like Emmett Moorhead might be the starter. He's now the backup, but Thomas Castellanos gives them a dynamic they haven't had since Tyler Murphy played at BC 10 years ago and rushed for over 1,000 yards at quarterback. They wanted a more spread type system. They wanted a guy that could also throw the ball, but they wanted a guy that can run, and they got him. So Jeff Hafley has said from the moment he got on campus, he impressed them, and every week he's getting better. This is going to be his eighth start, so he's still maturing. He hadn't played quarterback consistently since high school in Georgia, so one of those young guys that they still expect to see a lot of maturation in the last half of the year. But no question, the offensive line, there's at least four pros up front, four pro prospects, maybe even five. So when you have that type of line, you're probably going to have a good year.
Now, the Eagles haven't gone to a bowl game since 2019, one win away, sitting at 5 wins now. What is the atmosphere surrounding the program on the cusp of that bowl game?
It's been good. It's been one thing about BC and any school in a big city, especially when there's pro teams around them. If you win, fans will take an interest. If you don't, they don't. So we've seen better crowds this year where there's been a little bit more buzz. We saw a great crowd on an 80-degree day on last Saturday, a homecoming when they beat UConn. That's an event. And Boston's an event town with the Patriots, Red Sox, Celtics, Bruins, etc. If you're winning and you're playing well, they're going to respond, and that's been the case this year. It's still probably not what they like, but it's getting there.
Absolutely. Now, Syracuse head coach Dino Babers made some comments earlier in the season surrounding, not sure if you saw, but surrounding the culture of NIL around college football now and how it's a little bit harder for some of those smaller ACC teams to get the guys out of recruitment or the transfer portal that they might want due to the state of NIL. Do you feel like Boston College is in a similar position to Syracuse in terms of losing some better talent to other teams in the conference?
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a concern. I understand Coach Babers The validity to that statement. I think you'll talk to any BC coach and they'll tell you they'll probably thinking the same thing. But the good news is BC has a collective now from NIL called Friends of the Heights that has been an extreme support system, and they've done a really nice job making sure that the money is there for teams that need it and for athletes that need it. So I think that's what Syracuse and BC and Wake Forest and the smaller schools in the ACC are going to have to do in terms of creating a better support system around them and making sure the coaches have the academic and financial ways to compete because the larger schools clearly are going to have more money, but I don't think any ACC school can really complain. I know that they probably would quietly, but there's a lot of money coming in every year for each school. I know it's not the Big Ten, I know it's not the SEC, but it's still a bountiful amount of cash for teams to use.
Absolutely. Going back to the bowl game for just a second, would you consider qualifying for a bowl game the measure of success, kind of the standard of success that BC holds itself to every year?
Yeah, no, I think that's always the standard, but I think it's always for BC, it's getting over the hump of 6, 7, 8 wins, get to 8, maybe get to 9 one year, like they had in the heyday with Matt Ryan. Have those years where there's flashing, top 25 teams, which they were consistently for years. They want to get back to that, and they can get back to that. There's plenty of resources at the school. They have one of the best indoors now in the country. So there's not a lot to complain about in terms of what they need. They just have to become a more consistent program, and I think you're seeing that in the last 4 games here. Hopefully that engine's starting to rev a little bit in that direction. They know it. They know they have to get better than 6-6 or 5-7 or 4-8. Clearly is not good. You want to get out of that valley and become relevant, become one of the top 35, 40 teams every year, year in and year out.
Absolutely. In terms of the matchup this week, Boston College Syracuse is considered a rivalry by some, right? Because both schools don't have another traditional football rival in the conference. Would you say that the Eagles look at it as a rivalry?
Yeah, no, I think they do. I think I've talked to the coaching staff about that a lot, and they definitely cross paths on the recruiting trail. So yes, I think it's important that the Northeast corridor is locked down for BC and Syracuse. It is important because they dealt so many times with each other back in the Big East days, and fans like that. They not only like it in football, they like it in basketball as well. So it's that familiarity aspect that Syracuse is going to be on the schedule every year. It's an easy trip for Boston fans to get to the Dome. It's an easy trip for Syracuse fans to get to Chestnut Hill. So that helps as well. So it's definitely a rival. I wouldn't say it's a fierce rival necessarily, but I think there's definitely a quiet understudy that says, you know what, it's always nice to beat Syracuse.
Absolutely. Now, Syracuse, a team on a little bit of a slide, as our listeners know all about, slid to 4-4, lost their last 4 straight. What is Boston College going to have to do to come into the Dome and to beat a struggling Syracuse team at home?
I think it all starts with the dominant offensive line and what they've done the last 4 games. They've rushed for over 1,000 yards. So that's what you're going to see. I know the Syracuse coaching staff knows that. I'm sure Dino Babers is preparing for that as we speak. Clearly, BC needs to generate a little better pass rush. They had it at times this year. They had it at times Saturday against UConn. In all their wins, that's been the case. Frustrating and flummoxing the opposing quarterback, generating a more consistent turnover ratio. Elijah Jones is one of the top cornerbacks in the league. He is leading the ACC in pass breakups. He's a guy to watch, number one on the defensive side of the ball. So it's a consistency on both sides, but offensively, they become more explosive with the Castellanos element at quarterback and with Kai Robichaux at running back, who's one of the best backs now in the ACC. I think you might see a similar game, at least BC hopes so, that Syracuse fans saw with David Bailey in 2019 and A.J. Dillon in 2019 when BC came to the Dome and ran pretty well.
Do you think there's a difference in how a team prepares to face a team like Syracuse that's really struggling, really hasn't been able to find themselves in over a month? How does Boston College prepare going into that?
I think that they prepared just like they prepare for everybody else. I think Jeff Hathaway has that pro-type background. He's a longtime coach in the NFL. It's just prepare. Don't worry about the opponent so much. It's all about them preparing themselves. And you know what? We're playing Syracuse great, but it's all about us. And I think every coach, especially when you're going well, has that mantra. And that's how they prepare. I asked him about UConn last week, and he said, "We don't. It's not so much about. It's not about UConn. It's about us. Yeah, they beat us in 2022, and we're upset with that. But it's all about self motivation. It's all about the fact they've proven they could do it. It's all about the fact they're running the ball at will now, and they feel like they've maybe have found a formula. So why not ride that?"
Absolutely. Now, last couple of questions here for you. I saw that you are an Ithaca College alum, so you spent some time in Central New York as
Yes.
well, not up at Syracuse, but what are you looking forward to coming back to Central New York this weekend, first weekend in November?
Thank you for pointing out my Ithaca Bomber heritage.
Yes.
I love it. Love that part of the country. Been there, many, many, many times. Obviously, I just love Central New York in general. I love taking the ride. I love the fact that it's not going to snow. I hope on Saturday.
We
So
hope.
yeah, let's hope. Always a question, but let's hope. But so many things to do. So many great restaurants. I think Syracuse is a great restaurant city. I love the culture in Syracuse. I almost went to Syracuse. I went to Ithaca instead, as you mentioned. Either way, it would have been a great experience. So I always feel I have a lot of friends in the area. So it's always fun to get back, and it always feels like a slice of home.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, John. So happy to talk to you. Voice of the Eagles. We will see Syracuse and Boston College on Friday night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley. I really enjoyed it.